afternoon, committee. House Taxation will come to order. First item would be requests for bill introductions. Do we have? Yes.
Good afternoon, Jessica Lucas on behalf of Idea Tech, RS number 3279. This would include machinery and equipment placed in inventory or work of progress as a qualified purchase for telecommunications.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Thank you. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to request an introduction for RS 3207. And it basically would establish a property tax exemption for 50% of the first $200,000 assessed value of homesteads, individuals 65 or older and having lived in the same house for 10 or more consecutive years.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce RS 3199, and it would exempt the sale of over-the-counter medications from sales tax.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce 22 RS 3327, and that has to do with food sales tax.
Thank you. Would you care to elaborate just a touch? I promise they won't grill you as much as they did me.
Well, that's because anyway, so it just removes the sales tax off food stampable items in the grocery store.
Okay.
Just no tricks and no diapers or anything like that. Just edible food stampable items.
Very good. Committee, questions? Objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Are there any further requests for bill introductions? Representative Clayton.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 22 RS 3260 regarding a sales tax exemption for the Johnson County Christmas Bureau Association. This is a mirror bill of SB 311, which had a hearing on the Senate side.
Thank you, Representative. Committee, are there any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Further requests for bill introductions at this time? Seeing none, thank you. Looks like the revisor's been busy. Committee, we will now move on to our first item of business for the day. It's a hearing on House Bill 2682, and I would first turn to the revisor for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2682 would approve an election that was held by the city of Latham, that would approve a city retailer sales tax, the amount of 0.5%. The election was held on November 2nd of 2021. And the sales tax would provide for public services for the city of Latham. Pursuant to the bill, the city published notice 20 days prior to the election, instead of the required 21 days statutorily required by law. The Department of Revenue would administer the collection and remittance of the tax, as is customarily done with all sales taxes. And lastly, the bill would go into effect upon publication in the Kansas Register.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for the revisor? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. Kathleen, would you like to address the fiscal note? There's not much on this one, but I think we'll hold off unless there's any questions, if that's okay. Committee, we have one proponent appearing before us today, and I'd like to welcome to committee as a conferee, Representative Blacks. Everyone should have received a copy of his testimony at your seat. I don't.
Oh, red light's on, so it's good. Apologize, committee. I prepared a written statement there late. I just delayed getting that in there. Basically, I was contacted. The city of Latham has 138 souls. They have one business, the Silver Saddle Saloon. And the good thing is you want to hit it on a Tuesday because that's chicken fried steak day. And I happened to hit that day when we met with the city clerk. And basically is what happened. I think the revisor pretty well summed it up. They provided me with election ballot validations, publications in the local paper, and receipts that had been paid. And basically the newspaper had it and failed to do it. The Butler County Times, I think, is not an everyday newspaper, and they just got it delayed one day. So they fell one day short from the statute, which would cost them another election, the time and delay into November. So they come to me and ask me if we could help out. And so the revisor graciously, I talked with him, and he's worked out a good solution to where this will validate the election. And so the minute it's published in Kansas Register, if it's passed, they'll be able to collect the sales tax. And like I say, there's just one business that they'll be doing on. I think this is the first time in the city of Latham's history they've ever had a sales tax. So they do need it to maintain their water tower. And they have one city clerk that operates water and records and a lot of other things, but they did dot every I and cross every T, just exactly like I said, and the vote was overwhelming, 23-12, it passed. So basically for them it's important. So for that, I'll stand for any questions if there's any.
Thank you, Representative Blacks. Do you know when did they discover this error?
It was shortly after, I'm not sure of the contact, but shortly after the election when they found out, because I've got all the details and she sent all of them. I think there's a written testimony in there by the city clerk that basically shows all the invoices, or at least a copy I have that showed it was paid for, and it was supposed to have been published on October the 5th, and it wasn't until the following newspaper edition, which put it one day short.
And do you know when the tax was supposed to begin?
It was supposed to be originally under the election was in April, the 1st of April.
Okay.
So that was when the original bill on the resolution was to take effect.
Okay. Committee, are there any questions for our conferee? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lex, do you know, was this something that we passed last year that gave them permission to go ahead with the sales tax, or when was that?
No, that was just this year. I mean, well, they had the election in November, the city election, the city did for the resolution, but this is the first time, to my knowledge, it's been in the legislature. Okay. Am I understanding what you're asking me, Representative?
The first, and the revisor might be able to clarify this, but cities have an authority up to 0.5% to go to the voters for without requesting permission. Is that correct, Mr. Siebers?
Yes, that's correct. The cities have, I believe, up to 2% they can levy without coming to the legislative authority. Most of the legislative authority that's been additionally above always goes to the counties. So there have been very few times ever that cities have gotten additional authority. It's my understanding, as the representative stated, that the city of Latham does not currently levy a sales tax. So this would be using just a portion of their currently allotted authority they would have.
Thank you for that clarification. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Black, or Representative Blacks, you had mentioned some other testimony. Leah, do we have some? I have also Eric Sartorius, but you referenced somebody else that provided.
I gave a copy to Leah of the written testimony from the city clerk, Laura Bruner.
Okay.
So you should be hopefully on the S file drive, I'm assuming.
Okay.
And basically it just stated pretty much what I've stated, that they had the election, they paid all the invoices, and it just was a day short. Yeah, that's been some time ago. I give that to you. I can give you a copy here if you would like.
Thank you. We'll make sure and get that distributed out to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have written only proponent testimony by Eric Sartorius with the League of Kansas Municipalities, and I show no other opponents, neutral or proponents. Is there anyone else wishing to appear regarding House Bill 2682? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on 2682. Committee, I would like you to get your information either out, paper or electronically, however you do it. I'd like to take a look at House Bill 2186. It is the single factor apportionment bill that we heard last year. We had a refresher hearing on this year, and I'd like to go ahead and see what the committee's desires is on that bill. And before we do that, I would turn to the reviser just for a reminder on what that does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2186 would allow certain taxpayers to elect to apportion income based on the sales factor rather than the current three-factor apportionment. And these would be businesses that are engaged in manufacturing, production of electricity, or storage of electricity, and certain agricultural activities. As I stated, this would be an election, not a mandatory requirement. And the election would be effective for effectively 10 tax years and would be binding, except that the Department or Secretary of Revenue, would, with the Secretary's permission, be able to terminate the expiration of remaining years at the discretion of the Secretary.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Adam, I should have asked you this ahead of time. Is there Section 4, this on the very last page, this takes effect in the publication. Is there any dates that we need to change on this, since we did hear this last year, kind of anticipating a passage last year? I failed to read through this and find any that needed changed, but I didn't know if you knew of any.
Mr. Chairman, no, I looked through it also, and none of the dates and the statutes were not amended. It does not reference any subs, so as the bill currently reads, should be fine to move forward.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. Committee, any further questions for the reviser? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on House Bill 2186. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee find or recommend House Bill 2186 favorable for passage.
Thank you. And a second by Representative Epley. Discussion. Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
We will stand at ease or sit at ease while the amendment is distributed.
Big fun.
Does anyone not have a copy of the amendment? Okay. Representative Highland, would you like to explain your amendment?
Simply, these are businesses that came to the table after they heard about the bill and asked to be included.
Pretty clear cut. Do we have a second on the Highland amendment? Representative Mason. Discussion. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much does this change the fiscal note? Because it looks like adding these are pretty substantial businesses that are being added.
Representative Highland, do you have a estimate on that?
I do not.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Highland, you may close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment passes. We are back on the bill. Any further discussion? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment as well.
Okay. Okay, does everyone have a copy of the amendment? Looks like we do. Representative Bergkamp, would you care to explain your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess long story short, you'll see a lot of strike through on the bill. At the end of the day, it's essentially going to be for corporations in Kansas to have a single factors apportionment with no elections. And the effective date, I think, would be like 2024. The fiscal note for this would be a positive 20 million to the state of Kansas. So to offset that, I'm also going to do a 0.25% reduction to the corporate income tax rate, effective the same time, whatever the rate might be at that point in time, depending on other legislation that might change that.
Would either research or Department of Revenue, is that, I'm assuming the 0.25% is roughly to kind of balance out you said the $20 million fiscal note?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Committee, I'll give everyone a chance to read through and take discussion or questions on the amendment. Okay. Okay. Committee, we just had a little bit of clarification, almost procedural. There was a question on whether or not this would strike the Highland Amendment, adding different specific industries, and I would assume, actually the revisers clarified that this would strike that amendment.
Yes, what would happen, this underlying amendment goes into effect January 1 of 2024. So the previous amendment would go into effect effective on the bill through January 1 of 2024. Then the underlying, that amendment and all that provision would be eliminated, replaced by this new provision, if that makes sense.
Right, because we would no longer be picking out specific codes. It would be it would be across the board. Everybody would fall under the Bergkamp amendment.
That is correct.
Okay. Committee, is there further discussion? Yes, Representative Bergkamp.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did forget to mention that in the amendment, it's not 100% done because there's a lot of supporting language that's not included in there right now. But I guess the single sales factor is the bulk of it. What I'm trying to get at, just so people are aware that some of the supporting detail is not in the bill at this point in time. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I confuse easily, and looking at this, I'm confused. But Representative Burkamp, so tell me, if we go to a single sales factor apportionment in January 2024, system-wide for all industries, that raises $20 million on the positive you indicated. And so you're going to give everybody, to make it revenue neutral, a 0.25% reduction in their corporate rate, the base corporate rate. I'm just wondering, and help me, I'm trying to think, if I'm heavy in property and I have a corporation that have a lot of property, a lot of people, and maybe not a lot of sales outside of the state, you're going to give me a 0.25% reduction in my income tax, correct?
Yes, correct.
But by using just the one apportionment factor, might not be hurt more than that 0.25%. Do you see where I'm headed? If I'm heavy in payroll and facilities,
Yes,
and not so heavy in sales.
yeah, and traditionally, if you're heavy on property and payroll, you should benefit from the single sales factor in Kansas, because your ratio that you're going to allocate to Kansas will be less, because most of your, I guess, depending on your sales factor, if more are in Kansas or outside. But if you sell more outside, potentially you'll have less. So theoretically, this typically is seen as favorable to people who are based in the state already, and maybe less favorable to entities outside selling into the state with a presence.
I see that. I understand that. I'd sure like to just keep the 20 million and move forward if we're going to go that direction. But I would also, I'm somewhat reluctant. I don't mind allowing C Corps or Corps to choose possibly to get started. I know a lot of other states have had single factor formula for a number of years. Some it's newer. And I'm not sure I want to jump totally to adopt a single factor sales formula right from the get-go. Thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? Representative Bergkamp, I would ask, have you visited with some of the proponents? I know we heard into the testimony that some business industries favored this, some didn't. I just worry, where we haven't had a chance to vet this in a hearing, how is it going to impact those industries that prefer the 3-factor formula currently?
Yeah, not entirely. I know that one of them wasn't overly supportive of it. I did include the 0.25% of it reduction, but I assume that probably didn't change the answer a whole lot. So I would say, by and large, overall, no. But it would benefit some and hurt others, and I don't know what that mix looks like 100%.
Right, and I know each business is obviously going to be unique in its approach to its tax policy, but I guess it's my personal opinion. Just I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I know that looking at the states around us, there are a lot of people that have went to strictly a single factor apportionment. But I wonder if we might be getting a little over our skis on this one. But I'll leave it up to the will of the committee on their choices. Is there any further discussion?
I agree with you.
Okay. Seeing none on the Bergkamp amendment, did we get a second on that? Okay. Do we have a second? I apologize, committee. Okay. Thank you, Representative Aberkamp, for a second. And now, is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the Bergkamp amendment, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no?
No.
Noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. Thank you. We are back on the bill. Is there further discussion? Representative Gardner.
Mr. Chairman, I do have an amendment. I haven't really seen it, so Adam, I hope you did a good job of what my request was. Committee, I've read a couple articles on states that have adopted or have looked at single sales factor apportionment, and they just keep talking about the manufacturing jobs that will bring into a state. And I'm not sure it will bring in a lot of manufacturing jobs, but I want to sort of take a look at that. So if this bill does pass and go forward, I just want a written report to the Committee on Taxation, both House and Senate, concerning this bill and the number that have elected the sales factor apportionment, and that could lead to various other questions once we have the secretary up in front of this committee. So that's what my amendment does. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. First of all, do we have a second? Representative Baker on a second. And further discussion, committee? Representative Epley.
Question for the, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just a question for the maker of the amendment. I assume that this is just a reporting mechanism. There's no sunset to this?
No, it's a reporting mechanism. By March 1st, 2026, they should come back to the House Taxation and Senate Taxation and give us a report. That doesn't sunset the whole.
It's just a reporting mechanism.
Just a reporting mechanism. It gives them 2 or 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to follow up on that, this isn't a recurring requirement. It's just a one-time requirement.
Initially a one-time requirement, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Sanders.
My question's along the same lines as Representative Epley, but just in words that I would understand. This amendment does not significantly or in any way really change the core, what the bill would do. It just adds this reporting requirement. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let the record show that Representative Gardner nodded.
Yeah.
I heard it. Okay. Committee, are there any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, we will, Representative Gardner, you may close on your amendment.
I close and move my amendment.
Thank you. Committee, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment passes. We are back on the bill. Further discussion. Seeing none, Representative Mason, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll renew my motion for the committee to recommend House Bill 2186 favorable for passage as amended.
Thank you. Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Does anyone wish to have their vote recorded? Okay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Committee, that concludes our business for today. I apologize for being so quick, Representative Gardner. Stay tuned. We are still working on the agenda for next week. We have turnaround. Obviously, we have Monday off. We're out of session, and we will be meeting to decide the agenda on next week, but I'm sure Leah will be more than proficient getting that out when we've got that set. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.